The HOA president's son ended up calling 911 on me over a smart lock at 6 in the morning, no less. So the cops showed up because this 21-year-old decided it was some kind of emergency. All I'd done was install a lock on my own pool gate out at my ranch. But here's where it gets completely absurd. When the officers arrived, the guy was literally in the act of trying to break into my pool, shouting at the top of his lungs about how he had a right to swim. The cop asked him a single question that flipped the whole situation. "Son, do you actually live here?" His answer left the officer speechless, and let's just say that smart lock ended up being worth far more than the $200 I paid for it. Drop your city in the comments. I'm keeping track of America's wildest HOA stories. After years of grinding out code until 3 in the morning, fueled by nothing but takeout and energy drinks, I finally caught my break. My startup sold to Google, and with that windfall burning a hole in my pocket, I bought what I thought was my dream spot, a 2-acre spread in Oak Creek Estates, complete with a stunning 40-foot infinity pool overlooking the Pine Hills. The first couple of weeks were everything I'd hoped for: birds singing instead of endless Slack pings, real sleep instead of staring at error logs until sunrise, and best of all, complete silence. I'd swim laps at dawn, dive into new projects without being disturbed, and drift off each night to the sound of the wind through the trees. It felt like perfection. Too perfect, it turns out. The first sign that something was off happened one Monday morning. I stepped out to the pool, coffee in hand, and immediately noticed the lounge chairs had been moved. Nothing dramatic, but enough to catch the eye of someone like me, who notices details. There were damp spots on the deck that weren't there the night before, which was odd since it hadn't rained. I told myself I was overthinking it. Maybe the wind had nudged the chairs, maybe it was just morning dew. Then I went to clean out the skimmer basket and my stomach dropped. Floating among the leaves was a used condom. My hands were actually shaking as I fished it out with the net. Someone had been in my pool, and judging by the evidence, they hadn't been there just to swim laps. The rest of that morning, I walked the property searching for more clues. The trash bin near the pool house had 6 empty White Claw cans, which was especially unsettling because I don't even drink. Cigarette butts had been crushed right into my clean patio, and worst of all, I found what looked like dried puke hidden behind a planter. My retirement haven had been turned into someone else's party spot, and I had no idea who, how, or when they'd gotten in. The main gate had been locked, as always. The side gates were all secure, but clearly, a bunch of people had managed to get in and treat my private backyard like it was their personal nightclub. Later that day, I remembered there was still an old security camera aimed at the front gate, a cheap, glitchy model the previous owner had left behind, but maybe it caught something useful. I scrubbed through hours of footage until I reached late Saturday night, and what I saw made my blood boil. First one car pulled up, then another, then more teenagers and young adults piling out until there were at least 20 or 30 of them. And at the gate, acting like the door guy at some club, was a young man I'd later learn was named Chad. He was collecting cash from each persona, looked like around $50 each, before letting them through the gate using what had to be a copied key or stolen code. The footage from the party itself was even worse than I imagined. They weren't just swimming, they were pounding drinks, blasting music, and couples were hooking up right on my pool deck. One kid puked straight into my pool, while another tossed beer cans into my garden beds. What had been my peaceful sanctuary was now a full-on party zone. But the worst part? Watching Chad at the end of the night, casually counting a fat stack of bills and stuffing it into his pocket with a smug grin. This wasn't harmless trespassing, this was a business. A quick head count suggested he'd pocketed over $1,000 from just that one night by selling access to my pool. The next morning, I headed to the hardware store and bought the best smart lock I could find, an August Smart Lock Pro, complete with an HD camera. I spent the afternoon getting it set up so the camera would catch anyone coming near the gate. For extra measure, I hung up a big private property and no trespassing sign. The lock could only be opened through my phone, and it would alert me instantly if anyone tried to mess with it. I figured that would end it. Turns out, I was very wrong. Barely 2 hours after I finished the install, someone started pounding on my front door so hard it felt like they'd break it down. I opened it to find a woman in her mid-50s, dressed in what can only be described as the classic Karen uniform, bleached blonde bob, huge sunglasses despite standing in the shade, and a face locked in rage. "What is that monstrosity on your gate?" she shrieked, not even bothering with a greeting. I tried to introduce myself and explain that I was the new owner, but she cut me off mid-sentence, jabbing a manicured finger in my face. "I am Barbara Whitman, president of the Oak Creek Estates Homeowners Association, and that electronic eyesore violates Section 7.3.2 of our community standards for aesthetic uniformity." She shoved a paper at me, a formal HOA violation notice, and announced, "You have 48 hours to remove that lock or face a $500 daily fine." "Fines? This neighborhood has standards," she snapped. "We're not some tech ghetto where people can slap up whatever gadgets they feel like." Her voice had risen to a shrill pitch that probably only dogs could truly appreciate. I tried to explain what had happened: the trespassing, the signs of wild parties, the fact that strangers had been using my private pool, but she cut me off before I could finish. "If you have security concerns," she said, her tone dripping with contempt, "you submit a formal request to the HOA board. You don't just decide things on your own that could drag down our property values." She stormed off, leaving me on the porch still holding the violation notice. That's when my elderly neighbor Arthur shuffled over from next door, carrying what looked like a loaf of banana bread. "Welcome to Barb's Kingdom," he said, offering a wry smile. Arthur glanced at the paper in my hand and shook his head. "Section 7.3.2a, that's her favorite trick. She made that one up last year when the Johnsons tried to put in a video doorbell." He paused, then said something that made my stomach tighten. "You know, before she lost everything with that Dragon Plaza fiasco, she was pretty reasonable. But now, that HOA title is the only thing she has left. She guards it like a dictator guards their last piece of power." Arthur sat with me on the porch and, over the next hour, painted a clearer picture of Barbara and her story. She and her husband had once been big in real estate, living large until their biggest projected Dragon Plaza imploded spectacularly. Lawsuits piled up, bankruptcy followed, and the marriage didn't survive either. Barbara lost almost everything except her house in Oak Creek and the title of HOA president, and her son, Chad, Arthur added, lowering his voice. "He was in college until he got caught borrowing a professor's laptop. Now he just lives at home, strutting around like he runs the neighborhood." I must have looked puzzled, because Arthur leaned closer. "She needs your pool, desperately," he explained. "Big house, no steady income, lifestyle she can't afford anymore. Your pool, especially since the old owner barely used it, became Chad's little gold mine." It clicked. "Those parties," Arthur went on, "they've been happening every weekend for years. $50 a head, sometimes more if Chad said it was a special event." My jaw dropped. This wasn't just harmless sneaking in, it was an organized side hustle run on my property. "But how'd they get access?" I asked. Arthur shrugged. "The previous owner was hardly ever here. The property management company had keys. Chad's girlfriend worked there until recently. You can figure out the rest." The next few days were oddly quiet, too quiet. I kept waiting for Barbara to show up screaming again or for Chad to make another move, but nothing happened. Chad didn't come near the pool, probably because the smart lock had him beat. I started to think, maybe, just maybe, I'd solved the problem, but I should have known better. These people had turned my property into a business, and they weren't going to give it up without a fight. What happened next would end up making headlines and changing everything. It was early on a Thursday morning. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard shouting near the pool gate. I grabbed my phone and opened the camera feed. There was Chad, flanked by 3 of his buddies, all carrying pool bags and coolers. He was pulling on the gate, kicking it, and cursing at the top of his lungs. "What the hell, Mom said this would be fixed." One of his friends, a girl already in a bikini despite the morning chill, whined, "Dude, I promised Ashley we'd have the sunrise shoot. She's bringing her photographer." Chad got even more worked up. "This stupid lock, I bet that nerd put it in just to screw us over." Then, right on camera, I watched Chad do something that sealed his fate. He looked directly at my camera, pulled out his phone, and punched in 3 numbers. I could see it clear as day. 911, Hello? Chad's voice instantly changed from furious to panicked. Help, there's a man drowning in my neighbor's pool. I can see him sinking and he's not coming back up. He went under. Oh God, he's not moving. He added frantic hand gestures for effect, as if the 911 operator could see him. The gate's locked with some kind of electronic thing. I can't get in to save him. Please. The address is 1847 Oak Creek Drive. Please hurry. Then he hung up and gave his friend a smug high five. That'll show him, he bragged. Cops will make him open it, and Mom will handle the rest. Barely 8 minutes later, 2 police cruisers came flying into my driveway. I met them at the door, still in pajamas, coffee cup in hand. Sir, we've got reports of someone actively drowning in your pool, one officer said urgently. We need access right now. They had bolt cutters at the ready. Heart pounding. I kept my voice steady. Officers, I'll unlock the gate gladly, but first, you should see this. There's no one drowning in my pool. In fact, there's no one in my pool at all. But I can show you exactly who made that call and why. The officers exchanged a skeptical look but followed me to my living room. I had my laptop hooked up to my big TV. This, I said, queuing up the footage, is my pool at 6:13 a.m. I hit play, showing them the perfectly calm, empty pool and no movement, not even a ripple. Here's 6:14, I narrated. Chad shows up, tries the gate, gets frustrated. The footage clearly caught him yanking and kicking at it. And here's 6:15, I continued, pausing on the moment Chad glared right at my camera and pulled out his phone. We watched together as he launched into his dramatic, completely fabricated story about a drowning man. And here's the pool from 6:16 through 6:24, right up until you arrived, is still empty, still untouched. The senior officer's skeptical expression hardened into anger. He glanced out the window, where Chad was still by the gate, clearly waiting for the police to force me to open it. Filing a false police report is a criminal offense, the officer said, voice tight, especially when it wastes emergency resources. We had to pull units from real calls for this. They headed outside, and I followed, laptop in hand. Chad's smug look disappeared the second he saw the officers' faces. Did you make him open it? There's someone drowning, he blurted out. The officer cut him off sharply. Sir, we need to talk to you about making false emergency calls. Chad tried to pivot back into character. No, I swear I saw some it must have been the camera app glitching. The officer wasn't buying it. The app didn't glitch while you looked straight at the camera and dialed 911. We just watched the footage. I turned my laptop around, showing Chad the moment he made the call. His face went pale. Yeah, I thought I saw something, a broken bar, maybe it was a shadow. His friends suddenly discovered something very interesting on their phones and stepped back. Filing a false report like this can lead to fines, even jail time, the officer warned. You took emergency teams away from real people who might have needed help. At that moment, a Mercedes SUV came skidding into my driveway. Barbara jumped out, radiating fury. What are you doing to my son? She demanded, wedging herself protectively between Chad and the officers. He thought he saw someone drowning and he was just trying to help. That's what responsible neighbors do. The officer calmly pulled up the video on his tablet and held it out for her. We all watched her expression shift, the righteous indignation draining into shock, then panic. He must have been a broken bar mistaken. The stress of school, you know, he's under so much pressure. The next 20 minutes felt surreal. The officers took statements and issued Chad an official warning for making a false report. Barbara tried everything, crying, threatening them with complaints, promising it would never happen again, but the evidence was overwhelming. Before leaving, the senior officer turned to me. You might want to think about getting a restraining order, he said gently. This seems like it won't end here. Barbara heard that, and whatever mask of civility she had left vanished. She grabbed Chad's arm and glared at me with unfiltered hatred. You'll regret this, she hissed. I know how to make people like you move out. This neighborhood was perfect before you came. Enjoy your pool while it lasts. But why would an HOA president with $1 million house need to milk money from my pool? If you've ever dealt with a nightmare HOA, drop your city in the comments. I'm making a map of where the worst neighborhood tyrants live. The next morning at 7 a.m., The war officially began. I was finishing my usual laps, finally enjoying the pool without worrying about trespassers, when I heard sirens. Close. Too close. I got out of the pool dripping wet to find two officers walking up my driveway, both looking a little sheepish. "Sir, a broken bar, we got a noise complaint," one of them said, almost as if he couldn't quite believe it himself. "About a broken bar, you a broken bar swimming." They glanced at each other, clearly uncomfortable. "We have to respond to all calls, but maybe broken bar swim a little quieter." I turned to see Barbara glaring triumphantly from her window, arms crossed, like she'd just scored a point. Day 2 of Barbara's petty revenge tour escalated from noise complaints to measuring tape. I woke up to find her literally kneeling in my front yard with a ruler, snapping photos. Apparently, my grass was 3.5 inches tall, half an inch above the HOA's supposed limit. By noon, the neighborhood Facebook group was full of her posts. "Some people think the rules don't apply to them," she wrote, complete with dramatic close-ups of slightly shaggy grass. "We have standards in this community." The post got dozens of likes and angry emojis, mostly from her loyal clique that seemed to back anything she said on principle. Day 3 turned uglier. Full-blown character assassination. Barbara must have spent hours circling my property, photographing my security cameras from every angle. Her posts painted me as some kind of paranoid, tech-obsessed weirdo. "Our children are being watched by his cameras," she warned ominously, conveniently forgetting that those cameras had just stopped her son from committing a crime. The cameras only covered my own yard, but Barbara's post claimed, "He refuses to share neighborhood amenities while spying on our families." The comments rolled in fast. "Creepy. Why does he need so many cameras? My kids don't feel safe anymore." Each new comment felt like a small cute neighbors I'd never even met turning against me. By day 4, things escalated again. A thick envelope landed in my mailbox, stamped with the name Brewster, Coleman Associates. Inside was a demand letter, $50,000 in damages. It claimed I had inflicted severe emotional distress on Chad, defamed him by implying criminal behavior, and created a hostile living environment for the Whitman family. My hands shook as I read it. 50 grand a broken bar for stopping someone from trespassing on my property? The letter threatened more legal action if I didn't remove the smart lock and publicly apologize for harassing a young man who was only trying to help. That evening, I sat by the pool, staring into the water as dusk settled in, wondering if I'd made a huge mistake. What was supposed to be my quiet sanctuary had turned into a war zone. Neighbors now crossed the street to avoid me. Parents pulled their kids closer if I passed. I actually started to question myself. Maybe I should take the lock off, I thought. Maybe it isn't worth becoming the neighborhood outcast. But then I remembered why I had moved here in the first place, to finally have something of my own. I'd worked 60-hour weeks for 5 years to afford this home. Why should I let an entitled kid and his Karen of a mother scare me into giving that up? My thoughts were interrupted by footsteps on the driveway. Arthur, my older neighbor, walked up carrying 2 cups of coffee, looking serious. "Figured you could use this," he said, handing me one. We sat quietly for a moment before he spoke again. "You know why I am helping you, right? Why I'm willing to go against Barbara when everyone else won't." He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo of a smiling teenage girl. "My granddaughter, Stephanie, 16, straight-A student." Arthur's voice tightened. "Last year, she went to one of those pool parties, came home barely conscious. Hospital said her blood alcohol was .24. My stomach dropped." "Chad sold her vodka?" Arthur went on. $60 for a $20 bottle. His friends thought it'd be funny to shove her in the pool. "She nearly drowned." "Actually drowned, and not the fake kind Chad claimed the other day." Arthur's voice stayed steady, but his hand trembled. "I complained to Barbara," he said. "You know what she told me? Kids will be kids. Maybe teach your granddaughter to hold her liquor." That's when I realized that she wasn't just turning a blind eye. She was profiting. He set his coffee down and unlocked his phone again. "Here's what you don't know. Here's why Barbara needs your pool so badly." On his screen was an Instagram account, Paradise Pool Exclusive. It had over 5,000 followers. The bio read, "Oak Creek's most exclusive pool experience @y broken bar DM for bookings." Every photo, every single onia was of my pool. the infinity edge at sunset, the diving board with kids doing flips, the pool house decked out with string lights for parties. Check the tagged location, Arthur said. I did. Every post was tagged at a broken bar at my exact address. My jaw dropped. For 3 years, they'd been using my backyard to run an underground business. I kept scrolling in disbelief. Themed parties, midnight splash Fridays, sunset vibe Saturdays, Sunday funday photo shoots. One comment stuck out: best $50 I ever spent, way better than the public pool. I couldn't stop staring. These weren't random kids sneaking in. This was a well-oiled, full-scale operation. Over the next 72 hours, I went into full detective mode. I downloaded all 847 posts and cross-referenced them against my security footage to create a timeline. What I found was staggering. Fridays, midnight splash parties, 11 p.m.a. 3 a.m., $50 a head, usually 38-40 guests. Saturdays, sunset vibes, 6 p.m.a. Midnight, $75 VIP access to the pool house and kitchen. Sundays, influencer or so wannabe models pay $200 for 2-hour photo shoots. Wednesdays, private swim lessons with Barbara herself, at $100 per hour. Though from the footage, there was very little actual swimming involved. I pulled out a calculator. Even using conservative numbers, they were pulling in $3,500 $4,000 per week. Over 3 years, that added up to anywhere from $546,000 to $624,000. Let's round down, say $200,000 a year. $200,000 in revenue, all from my property, without my permission. And I was willing to bet Barbara hadn't paid a single cent of taxes on it. I reported everything to the IRS, and the deeper I dug, the worse it got. Footage showed Barbara herself counting thick stacks of cash at the end of each night. Chad kept what looked like an inventory list for alcohol sales, bottles marked up by 300% over retail. The totals on the spreadsheet made my head spin. This wasn't just petty theft. Barbara was running an empire out of my backyard. Holidays were even more lucrative. $100 entry fees for the 4th of July, $150 for New Year's Eve. They charged an extra $50 for access to my gazebo, which they advertised online as a VIP cabana. Then I found a video from just last month. Barbara stood by the pool, lecturing Chad about profits. "This month I'm taking 80%, she said coldly. "You need to learn better management skills." Chad pushed back, saying he did all the work. "I handle the cops, the neighbors, the hoe," she snapped. "That's worth 80%. Hearing her say I handle the cops made my blood run cold. They weren't improvising, they had systems in place to keep the racket alive. I started wondering how many neighbors had seen something, tried to speak up at broken bar and been shut down. In the community's old social media archives, I found my answer. 3 years ago, the previous owner of my house had posted complaints about noise and trespassing. The comments were merciless, led by Barbara herself, calling him a bitter recluse who hated seeing kids have harmless fun. 2 months later, he listed the house for sale. But then came the smoking gun, a video dated barely a week after I moved in before I installed the smart lock. Barbara and Chad were by the pool, having what sounded like a planning session. "The new owner seems like a tech nerd," Chad said. "Think he'll be a problem?" Barbara didn't even hesitate. "They all fold eventually. A few HOA violations, some social pressure, maybe a legal threat, or he'll either fall in line or move out like the others." Then she looked straight into the phone camera Chad was using to record and added, chillingly, "And if he doesn't a broken bar, well, we have ways of making life very uncomfortable for uncooperative neighbors." That was it. I saved everything, videos, screenshots, spreadsheets, timelines backed up to multiple drives, carefully organized in folders. But I wasn't done. I needed to see the whole picture. For hours, I moved like a machine. Click, download, label, repeat. When I finally leaned back and looked at what I'd gathered, it hit me. This wasn't some teen prank. It was a full-scale business operation, turning my property into a private luxury venue without my knowledge or consent. My mind drifted to Arthur's granddaughter, Stephanie, To the parents who thought their kids were safe at a neighborhood pool gathering, unaware they were really paying for a ticket into booze-soaked chaos. And to Barbara herself, always smiling politely at home meetings, playing the part of the kindly neighborhood matriarch. If she was this confident, this organized, she wouldn't keep everything in cash. There had to be a paper front to some shell company to give the illusion of legitimacy. I started digging. A search of the state business database revealed it. BNC Entertainment LLC, B for Barbara, C for Chad, registered at Barbara's home address, officially listed as an event planning company, but it had never filed a tax return, never had a business license, no insurance, no permits, and nothing but a name on paper, pure, untaxed profit. Then I dug deeper, cross-referencing the Paradise Pool follower list with local news reports. What I found made my stomach turn. At least 3 teenagers who'd attended those parties had ended up in the with alcohol poisoning. One girl had gone missing for 12 hours, later found unconscious in the nearby woods. Another kid crashed his car driving home drunk, thankfully only wrecking the vehicle, not himself. These weren't just harmless pool parties, they were dangerous, unregulated events that put kids at risk, and Barbara and Chad were pocketing every cent. I thought I'd seen the worst. Then I found the video that would end everything, the one piece of evidence so damning it would burn their whole operation to the ground. It was recorded just last week. My hands shook as I watched. Barbara and Chad weren't satisfied with just my pool, they were plotting to expand. They were eyeing the Johnson's tennis court, planning to sell exclusive court time, and the Miller's boat dock for premium water experiences. Then Barbara laid out her vision. Once I'm re-elected as HOA president next month, I can change the rule as emergency community use provisions. Then we can legally access any amenity we want. Chad smirked and asked about profit splits. 70-30, Barbara said. And that's generous. I leaned back, stunned. This wasn't just about my pool, it was about turning the entire neighborhood into Barbara's private business empire. HOA rules as weapons, neighbors' properties as assets. The question now wasn't whether to fight back, but how to do it in a way that would stick. Barbara had done this for years. She had systems, connections to probably leverage on half the neighborhood. But I had something she didn't expect. Video evidence of every detail, technical skills to organize it, and, most importantly, nothing left to lose. The neighborhood already hated me. What did I care if they hated me more? That night, I made my decision. I'd expose everything at a monthly home meeting, a public forum, with every resident present. No room for Barbara to spin or silence me. I worked for hours, shaping a presentation that would be impossible to ignore. 15 slides, telling the story step by step, from pool parties to profit margins, from noise complaints to criminal negligence, from paradise to prison. But even as I prepared, a question gnawed at me. Would anyone actually believe me? Or were they all benefiting, too? Were the other HOA board members getting kickbacks, afraid, or completely oblivious? I was about to find out. The October home meeting was just 3 days away. I registered to speak under the topic of neighborhood security concerns. Barbara approved my request with a polite smirk, probably thinking I'd show up to complain about break-ins, giving her even more ammunition against me. Arthur promised he'd come, sitting quietly in the back with his phone ready. This needs to be documented, he told me. When Barbara goes down, she'll try to drag everyone else with her. We need proof of what really happened. I couldn't help but smile. Barbara thought she was playing chess while everyone else played checkers. She was about to learn what happens when someone flips the whole board. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. I refined every slide until each piece of evidence was crystal clear, practiced my delivery in front of the mirror, timing myself to fit within my 15-minute slot, checked and rechecked my laptop and backup drives. But Barbara wasn't sitting still. The morning of the meeting, I opened my mailbox to find it stuffed with printed screenshots from the neighborhood social media page. Barbara had called an emergency HOA vote, property violations at 1847 Oak Creek Drive. She wasn't waiting for my presentation as she was striking first. I called Arthur. He just laughed, low and dark. Classic Barbara, he said. She'll try to find you into submission before you can speak. But don't worry, I've got something planned too. He wouldn't elaborate, just told me to trust him. That whole day, I paced around my house, reviewing notes and double-checking my equipment. This was my only shot to reveal 3 years of organized criminal activity. I couldn't risk a single technical failure. By 7 p.m., I was parked outside the community center. The lot was packed with more cars than I'd ever seen for an home meeting. Barbara had clearly rallied her loyalists. Neighbors I recognized from online arguments shot me hostile looks as they walked past. Chad was there too, wearing a tank top that read, "Support local businesses." It felt like a deliberate provocation. Barbara stood at the door in a navy blue power suit, clipboard in hand, greeting residents with a politician's practiced warmth. But her smile never reached her eyes. I waited outside until 7:25. Not wanting to give Barbara time to corner me privately. Then I walked in. The room was overflowing. Over 50 people squeezed into a space meant for 30. Extra chairs lined the walls, and some people stood at the back. I found a seat up front, near the projector. From the back corner, Arthur caught my eye and gave me a small thumbs up. His phone was already out, camera pointed at the room. Whatever happened tonight, there'd be a record. At exactly 7:30. Barbara banged her gavel, wearing a look of barely concealed triumph. "Before we move to our scheduled speaker," she began, her voice dripping with false concern, "we have an urgent matter to address. It has come to my attention that the new resident at 1847 Oak Creek Drive has installed numerous unauthorized security, and just like that, the battle had begun. Broken bar devices that are creating a hostile environment for our community." Barbara clicked her remote. Behind her, photos of my house appeared on the screen, my cameras, my smart lock, even the perfectly legal security system signs, presented as if I were running a criminal operation. "These devices violate multiple HOA regulations," Barbara continued, reading from her clipboard in a voice dripping with theatrical authority. "Section 7.3.2 on aesthetic uniformity. Section 4.1.7 regarding electronic devices visible from the street. And most concerning a broken bar." She paused for effect. "A broken bar." Section 9.2 on surveillance equipment that may capture images of neighbors or their children. That last part hit home. The crowd murmured angrily. Barbara knew exactly what fears to poke at. "Never mind that my cameras only covered my own property. Therefore," Barbara declared, her voice rising over the noise, "I motion to impose an immediate $5,000 fine for multiple violations plus $500 daily until all unauthorized equipment is removed." "All in favor?" Hands shot up like they'd been rehearsed. 47 in total. Only 3 people didn't vote, including Arthur. Barbara's smile was victorious as she banged the gavel. "Motion carries. Mr. Thompson, you are hereby fined $5,000. Now," she added sweetly, "I believe you registered to speak about security concerns?" I stood slowly, connecting my laptop to the projector. Faces glared at me, satisfied they just put the outsider in his place. I smiled. "Thank you, President Whitman," I began. "Yes, I'd like to talk about security, specifically, the security of my private property." I clicked to my first slide, a peaceful sunset photo of my pool. "This," I said, "is what I bought, a private space, after years of hard work." Then I clicked to the next slide, empty beer cans, cigarette butts, and worse. "But this is what I actually got." The room shifted uncomfortably. "Someone has been using my pool without permission. But that's not the worst part." Click. Next slide, footage from my security cameras. Teenagers drinking, couples in compromising positions, someone vomiting into the pool. "Oh my God, that's Jessica." A woman in the third row screamed, "That's my soda, he's only 16. Another parent shouted, face purple with rage. Chad looked up from his phone. The smirk slid off his face, but I wasn't finished. Click. Next slide, Chad at the gate, collecting cash from arriving teenagers. Later, Chad handing an envelope to Barbara. The room erupted. Shouts, gasps, accusations. "What the hell is this? Is that our HOA president?" Barbara tried to regain control, voice shaking. "These are obviously fake deepfakes." But the crowd was no longer listening. Click. Next slide, a screenshot of the Paradise Pool exclusive social media page. 5,247 followers, I read calmly. 847 posts over 3 years. Every photo taken at my pool, Every single one tagged with my address. Phones came out. Parents scrolled furiously, some recognizing their children in the photos. They've been selling access to his pool. Someone shouted, "For how long?" Click. Next slide. My spreadsheet. A conservative estimate, I explained. $200,000 per year. Over 3 years, $600,000. All unreported. All untaxed. The noise grew louder, angrier. Barbara kept banging the gavel, voice cracking. "These are baseless accusations. I demand you stop this presentation immediately." But I was far from done. "One last thing," I said. Click. The video played. Barbara's voice filled the speakers, calm and calculating. "This month I'm taking 80%. You need to learn better management skills." The room fell dead silent, every eye on Barbara. Then her voice continued. "I handle the cops, the neighbors, the HOA that's worth 80%. For a moment, it was so quiet you could hear people breathing. Then, "Where's our home money, Barbara?" Someone shouted. "The dam broke." "You've been lying to us. My daughter could have drowned at one of those parties. This is fraud." Barbara pounded the gavel, screaming for order, but no one was listening. Chad tried to slip out, but furious parents blocked his path. "You sold my kid alcohol," one father roared. $60 for a $20 bottle? I raised my voice over the chaos. "But wait," I said, clicking to the next slide. "There's more." The room finally quieted just enough for me to speak again. "BNC Entertainment LLC, I announced. Barbara and Chad's little company, registered as an event planning business." I clicked to the next slide. Business registration documents projected on the screen. "Never filed taxes, never got permits, never carried insurance." Another click. The numbers appeared in bold. $600,000 in revenue. $0 reported to the IRS. The realization hit the room like a hammer. Tax evasion, fraud, selling alcohol to minors, child endangerment. This wasn't HOA drama anymore. This was criminal. Then parent number 5 stood up, her hands trembling. "My daughter," she began, her voice cracking. "My daughter is in the ICA from your party 3 weeks ago." The room went dead silent. "Emma came home unconscious, blood alcohol poisoning. The hospital said she nearly died as she's still in intensive care." She held up a crumpled hospital bill. $47,000 in medical bills. "All because of your illegal parties." The friend who brought her home said she paid someone named Chad for vodka. Tears streamed down her face. Chaos erupted. Parents shouting over each other, some rising to their feet. "My son is in rehab. You told us Caleb was the problem. You've been using us to protect your crime ring." Barbara's carefully controlled world was collapsing in real time. Desperate, she tried to rally. "These are lies. This is manufactured evidence. I was just trying to provide safe, supervised activities for our youth. The money went to maintenance and improvements. Then show us the HOA accounts." Someone yelled back, "Where's the money, Barbara?" Her face drained of color. She looked around the room for Eliesa, but even her usual supporters stared at her in horror. Then Chad made a run for it, bolting toward the door. But Arthur stepped out from his corner, camera still recording. "Going somewhere, Chad?" Arthur asked coldly. "I think these parents have some questions for you." Trapped, Chad spun around, cornered by furious parents demanding answers. I clicked to my next slide. "I've already sent all of this evidence to the authorities. I told them 3 hours ago." The next slide listed them: IRS, tax evasion, state tax board, fraud, business licensing department, local police, underage drinking, child endangerment. Barbara's legs buckled. She dropped into her chair, the gavel slipping from her hand. "But I had one final slide." "She didn't just steal from me," I said quietly. "She endangered your children. She used your trust to your HOA positions to protect her crimes. She made you accomplices." I looked around the room. "So what are you going to do about it?" The room exploded into action. Someone had already dialed the police. Parents demanded immediate access to HOA financial records. Board members scrambled to distance themselves, insisting they'd known nothing. Chad was surrounded by red-faced parents yelling questions about what he'd sold their kids. And Barbara? She just sat there, frozen, staring at the wreckage of her carefully crafted empire. Arthur kept filming everything, capturing every second of Barbara's fall. Then the doors opened. 2 IRS agents in dark suits stepped in, followed by local police officers. The room fell silent. "Barbara Whitman?" one agent asked. Barbara's head jerked up, her face a mask of sheer panic. "We need to speak with you regarding BNC Entertainment LLC and approximately $600,000 in unreported income." She tried to run a hopeless, clumsy scramble. Her heel caught on a purse, and she sprawled face first onto the threadbare carpet. The crowd gasped. She struggled to get up. Her perfect suit rumpled, makeup streaked. "I want my lawyer," she screamed as officers pulled her to her feet. "This is entrapment, harassment. I'll sue all of you." No one listened. The room watched in stunned silence as the woman who'd ruled the neighborhood with an iron fist was led away in handcuffs. Chad tried to follow, panic in his voice. "Mom, Mom, say something, help me." But Barbara didn't even look at him. She kept her head down, defeated. Chad's betrayal was complete. Then, slowly, someone in the back started clapping. Others joined in. Within seconds, the entire community center was on its feet, applauding. People who had glared at me an hour earlier now came forward, shaking my hand, thanking me. Parents hugged each other, relief flooding their faces. Board members scrambled to renounce Barbara's crimes. Through it all, Arthur's camera never stopped trawling and capturing the moment a community woke up. The meeting continued for another 2 hours. Residents demanded a full investigation, formed new committees, and called for immediate elections. Barbara was in jail, but Chad was still out there. And just before the meeting ended, he posted something that made my blood run cold. Guess what Chad tried to do next? Wrong answers only in the comments. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Within 24 hours, local news stations were all over the story. HOA president runs underage drinking ring made for sensational headlines, and Barbara's mugshot became the most shared photo in the state. Channel 7 aired a special investigation, interviewing outraged parents and running clips from my security footage, with faces blurred. Overnight, the Paradise Pool's social media page gained 10,000 new followers before being shut down as evidence. Chad's personal accounts were flooded with furious comments from parents whose kids had been endangered. But what truly chilled me was Chad's final post before his arrest. "They're lying. I'll be back. That pool is mine." Even facing criminal charges, he still clung to the delusion that he had a claim to my property. A week later, the full scope of Barbara's crimes became clear. Forensic accountants uncovered that she'd embezzled over $50,000 from HOA funds to finance her lifestyle. The illegal pool parties had supplied the rest. 8 families filed civil suits against her. Thankfully, the girl who'd been in the ICU survived, but her family's lawyer filed a $2 million lawsuit. Prosecutors argued Barbara was a flight risk with hidden assets, and the judge denied her bail. Chad got off lighter. He was released on recognizance, but ordered to stay 500 feet from my property and sentenced to 300 hours of community service. Ironically, the judge made him work at a youth substance abuse center, forcing him to confront the real consequences of what he'd done. During sentencing, his tears were the first sign of genuine remorse I'd ever seen. A month later, Barbara's house sprouted a foreclosure sign. Word spread that she'd mortgaged it 3 times trying to cover her legal fees. Chad was spotted working at McDonald's, part of his court-ordered employment requirement. The HOA moved quickly, emergency elections were held, and a retired accountant named Jim was voted in as the new president. His first act? Ordering a full financial audit. His second? Sending me a formal apology and a $10,000 settlement for damages caused by the previous board. I used that money to upgrade my security system, facial recognition, 8 night vision cameras, motion sensors sensitive enough to spot a mosquito, an automated alert system so thorough it would make Fort Knox jealous. But the crown jewel was the sign I installed next to my pool, a 6 feet tall, professionally made, impossible to ignore, private property. Facial recognition active. Chad Whitman detected equals automatic police response. Yes, Chad, this means you. 2 weeks after installation, the system got its first test. Chad appeared at exactly 51 meters from my property line. Silence. Then he took a single step closer, crossing into the 50-meter zone. Instantly, alarms blared. Floodlights roared to life, and an automated voice boomed. Intruder detected. Chad Whitman identified. Calling police. Chad ran so fast he left his shoes behind. Arthur got the whole thing on video and made it his ringtone. Now, I finally have the peace I paid for. Every morning, I swim my laps undisturbed. Every evening, I sit by my pool with a book and a glass of whiskey, listening to the sound of absolutely nothing. Barbara is serving 5 to 7 years for tax evasion, fraud, and child endangerment. Chad still drives by sometimes, but he's learned to stay exactly 52 meters away. The alarm catches him every time. Last week, I got an email that made me laugh. Congratulations, you've been elected HOA president with 98% of the vote. I stared at it in disbelief. After fighting so hard to get out of HOA politics, they wanted me to run the show. Seconds later, Arthur texted, "With your security system, we'll have the safest neighborhood in America. Congrats, Mr. President." You know what? Maybe it wouldn't be so bad. At least I knew I'd never abuse the position. So that's how a $200 smart lock exposed a $600,000 crime ring, sent an HOA president to prison, and accidentally made me the most reluctant HOA president in history. The lock Barbara called an eyesore turned out to be the key to justice. She wanted it gone within 48 hours. Instead, she ended up behind far uglier locks for 5 to 7 years. As for Chad, he actually tried to break in again last week. The footage is wild. Should I do a part 2? Let me know in the comments. And remember, if your HOA president seems weirdly obsessed with your pool or broken bar, maybe install a smart lock. You never know what secrets might surface. What did we learn today? Probably nothing. But hey, it was fun, wasn't it? Show some love with a like, yeah, and don't forget to subscribe to Ya Stories.